Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Carter Blaine, and I was 52 when the call came that changed everything. I'd spent over 2 decades negotiating multi-million-dollar commercial real estate deals across the U.S., a career built on precision, patience, and knowing exactly how to read a contract line by line. Unfortunately, I didn't read the fine print of my own marriage until it was almost too late. It was a crisp Thursday morning in Brussels. I was 4 days into a 10-day trip, finalizing a logistics center acquisition for a shipping conglomerate. As always, I was sharp, caffeinated, and ahead of schedule. Then my phone buzzed. "Carter," the voice on the other end said, unmistakably my wife Melina, but it wasn't the voice I knew. There was no warmth, no softness. Just smug detachment. "I'm divorcing you. I've already sold the beach house. Kyle and I need a fresh start." She laughed. Actually laughed. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just paused. "I understand," I said, my voice calm even. And in that moment I realized she thought she'd won. Kyle, her personal trainer. 35. 10. Tragic taste in watches. I'd met him twice. Once at the gym Melina had insisted I tour with her, and once in our own kitchen. The second time he asked me how much my Rolex cost. Not subtle. Not classy. But dangerous in the way roaches are. You don't worry until you see too. "The sale went through yesterday," Melina added. "I figured you'd be okay at the Marriott when you get back. You're always traveling anyway." I stared out at the gray Belgian skyline, her words clanging like dropped weights. She really thought I'd just roll over and disappear. I didn't. I ended the call, opened my laptop, and sent 2 emails. One to Heather Callahan, my title agent of 12 years, and one to David Lorne, the lawyer I'd trusted longer than my marriage had lasted. Subject line: urgent, fraudulent property sale. Melina didn't know me at all. I met Melina 16 years ago at a property conference in San Diego. She was 29, sharp as a tack, working for a boutique interior design firm. She stood out: designer heels, effortless charm, razor wit. Within a year we eloped at a courthouse in Denver. No family, just adrenaline and champagne. 3 years later we bought our dream, a beachfront home in Seacliff Bay, Oregon. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, wraparound porch, $1.3 million, and nearly all my liquid savings. I spent every weekend for the next year sanding decks and rewiring outdated breakers while Melina hosted sunset wine nights and turned the master bedroom into a sanctuary of white linen and glass. She called it our forever place. I believed her. For a decade we built a life that looked perfect on the outside. Melina eventually left her job to open her own business, Melina Blaine Interiors. She even traveled with me on some deals. Madrid, Tokyo, Dubai. We were the jet-set couple realtors envied. But something shifted 2 years ago. She stopped asking about my work. She stopped traveling. Her girls' retreats became more frequent and more suspicious. Then came the gym. 5 days a week. Kyle Bennett. I should have seen it then, but part of me didn't want to believe that my wife, the woman who once stayed up until 3 a.m. helping me run comps on a development project, would become this. But I didn't argue. Didn't install trackers. Didn't go full paranoid husband. I just did what I do best. I observed. And I planned. 11 months ago, I quietly transferred the beach house into the Blaine Family Trust, with me as sole trustee. The paperwork was buried inside a refinance packet for a commercial unit we owned in Portland. Melina signed it while checking her phone, barely looking up. I told her it was to protect us both in case of market volatility. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. She didn't ask questions. She never did when she thought she was in control. After my email to David and Heather, I opened my briefcase and pulled out the original deed for the Seacliff Bay property. I always carried critical documents when I traveled, a habit from my early days when I lost a $2.7 million deal because a seller tried to back out over missing signatures. That trust deed clearly stated, Blaine Family Trust. Sole trustee, Carter Blaine. Melina had no legal right to sell anything. I called David as rain began to patter on the Brussels streets. "She can't sell what she doesn't own," he confirmed. "Any sale would be null and void. We'll notify the county recorder and flag all title agencies in the region." "She thinks she played me," I said quietly. David chuckled. "Then let's show her who taught the game." I didn't fly home right away. I sat in a cafe in Grand Place and watched umbrellas bloom across the cobblestones. My heart wasn't broken. It was clearing. A fog lifting. This wasn't just about a house or an affair. This was about the way she laughed when she told me. As if I was a fool. As if 15 years meant less than a protein shake in a hot tub with Kyle. So I booked a red-eye back to Portland. I didn't tell her I was coming. I didn't text. I didn't call. I just landed and drove straight to the house. It was Saturday. Overcast. The driveway wasn't empty. A matte black BMW, Kyle's. I parked across the street, heart steady. Walked up the familiar porch steps and tried the door. It was unlocked. Voices carried from the kitchen. I think the wall between the dining room and the living room should come down first, Kyle said, his voice brimming with HGTV confidence. Open concept sells better. Melina laughed. I stepped into the archway and said, not if it's not your house. She spun, her face draining of color. Kyle froze. Carter, she said, voice rising in an awkward soprano. You're home? Early, I replied. Clearly. Kyle backed up a step. I think I should. Stay, I said, interrupting him. This involves you too. Melina blinked. Carter, I know this is a surprise, but you tried to sell property that doesn't belong to you. I dropped my briefcase on the kitchen counter and pulled out the trust deed. This house hasn't been in your name for nearly a year. You signed it over without reading. Kyle leaned over. You told me it was your house. Melina grabbed the paper, her hands shaking. This is a trick. No. It's a contract, I replied. Something I take very seriously. Something you probably should have read before signing. I turned to Kyle. And the buyer? Jason Bennett? Your brother, right? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. You were trying to flip the property, I said, each word like a dropped hammer. You never expected me to check the paperwork. You thought I'd be halfway to Tokyo before I found out. But you forgot one thing. Melina looked up, trembling. What? You married a man who doesn't lose property. I recover it. The silence that followed my final words felt like it could split the walls. Melina didn't speak. She just stood there, clinging to the trust deed like it might somehow rewrite itself in her hands. Kyle, for all his gym-sculpted bravado, looked like a deer caught in headlights. And I was calm. After 15 years of marriage and 2 years of growing distance, I'd finally stopped pretending. The house wasn't just a symbol of what we'd built, it was proof that I'd learned from every deal, every betrayal I'd ever witnessed in boardrooms across the country. And now my wife had tried to steal it. You forged ahead with the sale anyway? I asked, voice low. Melina's chin lifted. The sale is already done. You can't undo it. I leaned in slightly. Wrong again. The buyer has no legal claim. You can't sell what you don't own, Melina. You just committed fraud. Her hands trembled, but her mouth still moved. You tricked me into signing that transfer. No, I replied. You just didn't bother to read it. Kyle took a step toward the hallway, but I raised a hand. Sit down, Kyle. He stopped like I'd slapped a leash on him. Who's Jason Bennett to you? I asked. Your brother? Or just another name on the shell company buying this house? Melina's eyes flared. That one hit the mark. The doorbell rang. Right on cue. I stepped aside and opened the door. David Lorne, my attorney, walked in with a manila folder tucked under his arm. I had texted him from the airport, asking him to meet me here. He nodded politely toward Kyle and Melina before setting the folder on the dining table. Afternoon, David said, calm and professional as always. I assume we're all familiar with the phrase, illegal conveyance? Kyle's mouth opened. Close. Melina didn't move. David opened the folder and began laying out copies of the trust deed, legal notices filed with the county recorder, and most damning of all, a preliminary injunction preventing any transfer of the property. This, David said, tapping the injunction, is already signed by the judge. So even if the buyer attempts to proceed, the title company will block it. You have no legal standing, Mrs. Blaine. I didn't know. Kyle blurted out suddenly. I thought the house was hers. David didn't flinch. Ignorance won't help you much if this goes to court. Melina snapped out of her daze. You wouldn't take me to court, Carter? Wouldn't I? I asked. You didn't just cheat. You orchestrated a theft. You didn't walk out, you tried to profit off our life. I was trying to build a future, she snapped. Kyle and I were going to open a business. I needed seed capital and the house was half mine. No, David interrupted. It hasn't been half yours for a long time. You signed that away. The realization finally seemed to sink in. She played the wrong game with the wrong man. Later that night, I checked into a Hilton near downtown Portland. The room was sleek, quiet, Exactly what I needed to think. David called me after dinner. I had my investigator run a financial trace, he said. You were right to suspect more. What did he find? I asked, already bracing myself. She opened a separate checking account last year. Not joint. Transferred nearly $200,000 from your shared savings. I closed my eyes. That was our emergency fund, built up from years of sacrifice. Most of it was moved in small chunks, just under the threshold that would trigger automatic fraud alerts. Clever, I muttered bitterly. Where did it go? Prepaid leases. A commercial property in Savannah, Georgia. Leases signed in her name and Kyle's. They're opening a fitness studio. Of course they were. David continued. We also uncovered the buyer of the beach house, Midcoastal Ventures. A shell company owned by Jason Bennett, Kyle's brother. My stomach turned. So that was their plan. Sell the house cheap to a fake buyer, flip it, and walk away with clean profit while I was stuck overseas. How airtight is the trust? I asked. Bulletproof, David replied. There's no way she can touch the house. But what about the money? I asked. The $200,000? That's more complicated, he said. Florida's an equitable distribution state. She could argue it was her share of marital assets. But with the shell sale and misrepresentation, we might have a case for fraud. I rubbed my temple. And if I wanted to go nuclear? David didn't pause. We file criminal charges. Grand theft. Conspiracy to defraud. Wire fraud maybe. The works. But I need to ask, do you want that? I didn't answer immediately. Part of me did. The part that remembered the way she laughed through that phone call. But another part of me didn't want a public spectacle. I didn't want to see Melina in jail. I just wanted this to be over. What are my options? I finally asked. We offer her a settlement, David said. She returns a portion of the stolen funds. Signs away any claim to the house or your assets. You waive criminal charges and any interest in her new business. Clean break. And if she refuses? Then we burn it all down. Sunday morning, I walked the beach at Seacliff Bay. The wind howled in from the Pacific, briny and sharp. I stood in the same place I'd stood 100 times before. Except now I was alone. I thought of all the nights Melina and I had sat on the porch drinking wine, laughing over terrible neighbors or half-baked renovation ideas. It had all been a lie, or maybe it had just become one. Somewhere along the way, the life we built diverged into two versions. Mine built on trust, hers on opportunity. I wasn't sad anymore. I was focused. By noon, David had sent the settlement offer to her lawyer. A return $120,000. Sign over full rights to the house. A waive any claim on remaining joint assets. A Carter waives any claim to her business. No criminal charges will be filed. She had 72 hours to sign. At 4:17 p.m. I got a text from an unknown number. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. You bastard. I hope this house rots with you in it. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. But by the time I returned to my hotel room that night, I felt the weight of everything crashing down. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the window. I wasn't a broken man, but I wasn't whole either. I'd spent years building a life with someone who viewed me as a stepping stone. A funding source. An obstacle. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the infidelity. Not even the money. It was the idea that I'd meant so little to someone I gave everything to. And it wasn't just betrayal, it was calculated, cold, and orchestrated like a hostile takeover. But now the boardroom was mine. By Monday morning, I no longer felt like the same man who had sat in a Brussels hotel room quietly absorbing the shock of his wife's betrayal. That version of me was gone. What replaced him was something sharper, colder, and far more dangerous. I checked out of the Hilton just after sunrise, drove straight to my attorney David's office, and walked in without knocking. He was already at his desk, coffee in one hand, reading over a stack of documents. You look rested, he said, sarcasm dry as toast. Barely slept, I replied. What have you got for me? He handed me a thin red folder. Something I thought you'd want to see before we push forward. Inside was a summary of the fitness studio Kyle and Melina were planning in Savannah. Leases, vendor contracts, business registrations. But what caught my eye, what nearly made me drop the file, was a scanned copy of an insurance application. One line stood out. Business partners listed, Melina Blaine, Kyle Bennett, and Madison R. Lane. I looked up. Who the hell is Madison Lane? David leaned back, rubbing his temple. Kyle's ex-fiancée. Turns out she fronted the initial deposit on the studio location. $50,000. And from what our investigator uncovered, she thought she was a silent partner. I froze. So Melina and Kyle were hiding her involvement? More than that, David said. They used her credit score to get approved for equipment financing. She didn't know she co-signed anything until last week when a lien notice hit her mailbox. I shook my head. This is a full-blown financial triangle. And no one's talking to each other. It gets better, he added, sliding another document across the table. Bank transfers from Melina's secret account show multiple payments to Madison over the last 6 months labeled as personal loan repayments. But that's not all. What now? David pulled up his laptop and turned the screen toward me. Security footage. From a warehouse district in Savannah. You'll want to watch this. I leaned in as the grainy footage played. It was Melina. And Kyle. And Madison. The timestamp was 2 months old. The three of them were standing in front of the now vacant studio space, gesturing animatedly. Kyle looked angry. Madison threw a folder to the ground. Melina walked away furious, but Kyle stayed, talking to Madison, hands on her shoulders. Then came the part that flipped my stomach inside out. He kissed her. It wasn't a peck. It was a full, lingering kiss. Madison didn't resist. I looked up. He was seeing both of them? David nodded. Looks that way. We cross-referenced Kyle's location history from his social media posts. He was in Savannah twice as often as Melina knew. I sat back in the chair, letting it all settle. The man Melina threw away a marriage for? He was playing her too. Does she know? I asked quietly. David gave a small shrug. Not unless we tell her. That afternoon I returned to the Seacliff Bay house. It was quiet. Melina's car was gone. The black BMW was still there, but the trunk was open, half-packed. I walked through the front door like I owned the place because I did. Kyle was in the living room, kneeling by a duffel bag. He looked up, startled. I was just grabbing some things. Don't worry, I said. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to tell you something you probably don't know. He straightened up, eyes wary. What? You're not the only one she's lying to. His brow furrowed. What are you talking about? Madison Lane, I said slowly, watching his face. The reaction was instant. Eyes wide, jaw clenched, a visible shift in posture. Not confusion. Recognition. She's part of your business deal, right? Or at least was. He stayed silent. Funny thing, I continued. I saw the footage. The kiss. In front of the studio. Kyle looked away. She thinks you're in love with her, I said. Melina thinks you're in love with her. And both of them think they're opening a business with a man who's loyal. Leave Madison out of this, he muttered. Why? I asked. Because she still doesn't know Melina used her name to secure a lease? Because she still doesn't know you financed that $70,000 loan with her credit? Kyle stepped forward. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You were playing both sides. And now the whole tower's about to collapse. That evening, David sent a revised settlement offer to Melina's attorney. This time it came with a warning. If she refused to sign, we'd expose the fraudulent co-signature, the misuse of personal funds, and the shell company transaction. We had legal grounds to pursue charges not just against her, but against Kyle too. At 10:08 p.m. my phone rang. It was Melina. I need to talk to you, she said, voice trembling. I'm listening. Not like this. Can we meet? I hesitated. Then agreed. We met at a small cafe on the bay, the kind of place we used to go before everything turned to rot. She looked different. Haggard. Eyes ringed with stress. The woman who once boasted about her curated image looked undone. She slid into the booth across from me. I didn't know, she whispered. Didn't know what? That Kyle was using Madison. That he used me. I found the emails last night. Messages between them from before we even filed the LLC. He promised me we'd be partners. You sold a house that wasn't yours to fund a dream with a man who was sleeping with his ex, I said flatly. Why should I care if he lied to you too? Tears welled up in her eyes. I felt nothing. I made a mistake, she said. No, I corrected. You made a series of calculated decisions. She nodded slowly. So what happens now? You sign the settlement. You walk away with 40% of what you stole. You get to keep your Jim and Kyle, if he stays. I don't press charges. But you never step foot in this house again. She reached for her purse and pulled out a pen. I didn't celebrate when Melina signed the settlement papers. There was no champagne, no exhale of victory. Just a calm, cold acknowledgement that the first battle had been won, but the war was still being fought. She returned $120,000. She waived her rights to the Seacliff Bay property. She kept her gym. I didn't press charges. But Kyle? Kyle thought he walked away clean. And that was about to change. The day after Melina signed, I sat across from David in his office again. I want to dismantle Kyle's future, I said plainly. David looked up from his laptop. Care to elaborate? I leaned forward. He may not have signed the fake sale documents, but he was part of the shell company purchase. That's enough to pull him into the fraud. He used Madison's identity to secure financing without full disclosure. He also used our beach house, my beach house, as leverage to negotiate with vendors. That's misrepresentation. David raised an eyebrow. You want to go after him directly? No, I said. I want to make it so that he never sees a cent of profit from the gym. And I want to make sure every investor, every vendor, and every leasing agent he deals with knows exactly who he is. David smiled slowly. You want to cut off his blood supply. Financially. Exactly. I don't want him in jail. I want him broke, embarrassed, and starting from zero, without Melina, without Madison, and without anyone willing to go into business with him again. Then we'll need to get creative, David said. And we'll need help. Enter Monica Trent, my former title agent and one of the sharpest real estate compliance specialists in the business. She owed me a few favors. I'd helped her win a lawsuit against a fraudulent investor 6 years earlier. We met in a quiet lounge downtown where I laid out the entire situation. She didn't blink. You want a professional blacklisting. I want the financial equivalent of the plague, I said. I want every red flag in his file blinking so loud that no bank will touch him. She smiled. Let's talk strategy. Phase 1, the paper trail. We started with public records. Monica filed complaints with the Secretary of State's Office for Business Misrepresentation and Improper Use of Shell Corporations. We attached documentation showing Kyle and Jason Bennett's involvement in a fraudulent real estate transaction, including Jason's sudden withdrawal of the offer once the trust was revealed. We reported the gym's LLC for failure to disclose beneficial ownership on the loan paperwork. Meanwhile, David filed a request for the subpoena of text and email communications between Kyle and Madison, citing ongoing fraud investigations into unauthorized use of financial information. We didn't need a conviction. We just needed noise. And Kyle? He was about to hear it everywhere he turned. Phase 2, the investors. Every new fitness business needs private investors, and Kyle's studio was no exception. Through a former contact at First Union Commercial Bank, we tracked the first 3 capital sources. Then we mailed them a file. Inside were a copy of the deed showing Melina had no right to sell the Seacliff Bay house, a copy of the LLC registration with Madison's name, without full consent, a sworn statement from Monica documenting the attempted misuse of funds, and, finally, an anonymous letter that read, "Would you trust your money with someone who lies on contracts, steals property, and uses his ex's identity to get what he wants?" By the end of the week, 2 investors pulled out. One even demanded his seed money returned, citing unforeseen legal exposure. Kyle's Instagram posts, which had previously been all gym renderings and motivational quotes, suddenly went silent. Phase 3, the insider flip. Madison. We hadn't spoken yet. I wasn't sure if she'd want to get involved. After all, she was no saint either. But after a few days of silence, I received an email. Subject line, "I want to talk." We met at a quiet cafe just off the waterfront. She looked tired but sharp, and surprisingly honest. "I had no idea," she said as we sat down. "About the house. About Melina. About any of it." "I believe you," I said. "I was supposed to be a silent partner. Kyle said he needed me for the credit check, that everything was above board. Then I started getting notices. That's when I pulled back." "You're still listed on the lease," I reminded her. "I know. I can't get off unless the LLC is dissolved or I sue." I paused, then slid a folder across the table. "This is a formal affidavit reviewed by my attorney. It outlines your involvement, your lack of informed consent, and Kyle's deception. You sign this and you're no longer just a victim, you're a witness." She stared at the folder, her fingers trembling. "I'll testify," she said quietly. "I want him to lose everything." Phase 4, the last straw. With Madison's signed affidavit, David filed a formal complaint with the Georgia Secretary of Business Regulation. Then we contacted the property management company leasing the gym space. Once they read the complaint, they initiated lease termination proceedings. I watched it unfold like a slow-motion detonation. Kyle tried everything, blaming Melina, then Madison, then bad legal advice. He even claimed I was stalking him. But the damage was done. His gym lease was canceled. His investors gone. His business, dead before it ever opened. And Melina? I don't know what happened between them, but I do know this. Her business Instagram stopped posting pictures of Kyle entirely. The last post with him was deleted. Quietly. No announcement. Just vanished. Just like his future. 1 week later, I stood on the porch of the beach house looking out at the water. Seacliff Bay was unusually calm that morning. I took a sip of coffee and let the silence sit. Then my phone buzzed. A new number. I answered. You think you're clever? Was Kyle. His voice hoarse, furious. You think this makes you a winner? No, I said. It makes me even. You're pathetic. You ruined a man's life because your wife didn't love you anymore. No, I replied. I held a man accountable because he thought stealing what wasn't his made him smart. You'll regret this, he hissed. I chuckled. I doubt that. And hung up. Revenge is rarely clean. It's a game of leverage, patience, and restraint. I had learned that over 2 decades in commercial real estate, how to hold pressure until the right moment and then press down hard. Kyle was crumbling and Melina was out of the picture. But just when I thought I'd settled the score, life threw in one more twist. And this one almost knocked the wind out of me. It was a Tuesday morning. Fog curled over Seacliff Bay like smoke. I was sipping my second coffee on the porch when David called. You might want to sit down, he said, which was never a good sign. I'm already seated, I replied. What now? He sighed. Jason Bennett filed a counterclaim in state court. He's suing you for breach of contract. I blinked. Excuse me? He's claiming that you illegally sabotaged the sale of the beach house after he'd already entered into a binding agreement. Claims you used undue influence and breached fiduciary duty. He bought the house through a shell company, I said slowly, using a seller who didn't own the property. David nodded. Correct. And we have the documents to prove that. But he's arguing intent. He claims you orchestrated everything, deliberately hid the trust status to entrap them. I leaned back. It's a bluff. Absolutely, David agreed. But it's a smart bluff. Filing this publicly puts your name in a bad light, hoping we'll settle to avoid court. What do you suggest? David was already ahead of me. We let him talk. And while he does, we dig deeper. By Thursday, Monica had sent me a file that made me smile in a way I hadn't in weeks. Jason Bennett, the supposed injured buyer, had a long and colorful financial history. 3 foreclosures, 2 failed LLCs, and 1 SEC fine for misleading investor statements. And most damning? He'd been previously investigated for flipping distressed properties under aliases. I met David in his office that afternoon and handed him the file. You wanted leverage? I asked. He flipped through it, eyebrows rising with every page. This isn't just leverage, he said. This is a wrecking ball. We filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, attaching Jason's history as supporting context, and formally requested sanctions for filing a frivolous suit with the intent to harass and defame. Suddenly, the Bennett brothers were in free fall. The next blow came from an unexpected angle. I received a call from Harper Chase Funding, a private lending firm in Savannah. The manager, who'd been anonymously sent our evidence packet, wanted to confirm something. Mr. Blaine, he said. Did Kyle Bennett and Melina Blaine use a property in Seacliff Bay as collateral for their pre-approval application? I froze. They used it as leverage? Yes. On the application they listed it under joint ownership. That's how they got their funding tier bumped. And that's fraud, I said evenly. He exhaled. We're re-evaluating their eligibility. They're at risk of loan revocation. Another domino fell. By week's end, Kyle's business was not just dead, it was radioactive. No bank would touch him. No investor would return his calls. Vendors were ghosting him. Even the gym equipment he'd prepaid for was being recalled by the leasing company after breach of contract proceedings. I thought that was the end of it. But revenge stories rarely stop where you think they will. The final twist came not from Kyle or even Melina, but from Madison. She called me late on a Friday night. Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic. I thought you should hear it from me, she said. Hear what? I'm pregnant. Silence. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Anger? Disbelief? Pity? He doesn't know yet, she added quickly. And I don't plan to tell him. I'm moving back to Charlotte. My sister's there. I'm going to raise this child far away from all of this. I rubbed my forehead, the weight of it all pressing in again. I appreciate you telling me, I finally said. You didn't deserve what happened, she murmured. I just wanted to say that. Then the line went dead. That night I sat in the living room of my house, watching the ocean through the window. The moonlight painted silver across the waves and the tide moved like breath. It was over. Not the pain. Not the loss. But the fight. Melina was out. Kyle was ruined. Jason's lawsuit had backfired. And Madison was retreating from the wreckage. I'd wanted justice. What I got was something messy, but no less satisfying. The next morning I met with David and Monica one final time. Everything's done, Monica said, setting down a thick stack of closed files. All complaints filed. All investigations resolved. There's nothing more to do. David added, the judge granted our motion to dismiss Jason's suit, with prejudice. Meaning he can't file again. And the court awarded us attorney's fees. I nodded. Good. Are you going to keep the house? David asked. I looked out the window. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe I'll sell it when I'm ready. But not to someone like Jason. We shared a quiet moment. David finally asked, so what now? I took a deep breath. Now I start over. Alone, but not broken. The dust had settled. Or so I thought. The house was mine. The fraudulent sale was dead. Kyle was financially scorched earth. Melina had retreated into silence. Even Jason's ridiculous lawsuit had been dismissed. But as I stood on the wraparound deck of the Seacliff Bay home one quiet Sunday morning, coffee in hand, watching the surf slap the sand, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in weeks. Exhaustion. Not the kind that sleep cures. The kind that settles deep in your bones after too much betrayal, too many late-night strategy calls, too many ugly truths you can't unhear. So when the knock came at the door that afternoon, I almost didn't answer it. But curiosity always did get the better of me. Standing on my porch was a woman in her mid-50s, well-dressed, with the cautious confidence of someone who'd spent her life speaking carefully and listening hard. She introduced herself as Camille Morrow. I was Melina's first employer, back when she was still Melina Sanders. Before she married you. I blinked. I'm sorry? She gave a tight smile. I know this is out of the blue. May I come in? Something about her tone, measured but urgent, told me this wasn't a social call. I let her in. We sat in the front room, the one Melina used to call her conversation space. It felt ironic. I know everything that's happened, Camille said. The beach house, the trust, the attempted fraud. But what you may not know is that this isn't Melina's first time. I set my coffee down. Camille continued. Years ago, she worked for me at Morrow Lux Properties. She was sharp, charming, clients loved her. But she had a habit of bending numbers and bending hearts. What do you mean? She got close with one of our investors. A man twice her age. Wealthy. Divorcing his wife. Sound familiar? My stomach turned. She convinced him to sign over controlling interest in one of his vacation properties to simplify tax issues. A few months later, she flipped it without his consent, made nearly $400,000 and disappeared. And the man? Filed a suit, but it was messy. She had text messages implying it was consensual. He dropped it after she threatened to release certain private details. That's when she vanished. Changed jobs, changed circles. Then she met you. I stared at the fireplace, realizing I'd been targeted, not loved. She told me about you, Camille added. A few years into your marriage. She called me out of the blue, bragging. Said she'd finally married her retirement plan. Those words sliced deeper than any court filing or phone call ever had. I should have warned you, she whispered. But I was afraid. She's always been dangerous when cornered. I shook my head slowly. No, you're here now. That means something. Camille handed me a small envelope before she left. Inside is a contact. A private forensic accountant who's helped me recover assets before. He's discreet. If Melina took anything else, he'll find it. And just like that, she was gone. I sat at the dining room table for hours, thinking about everything I didn't know. What else had Melina stolen, besides money, dignity, and years of my life? I made the call the next morning. His name was Julian Teague and he worked fast. Within 3 days he called me with findings that made my skin crawl. She had more than one funnel, Julian said. Your shared savings account was just the beginning. What do you mean? There was a custodial trust account you'd opened 10 years ago for your godson, remember that? My heart skipped. Yes, for his college fund. Melina listed herself as a secondary trustee when you updated your will 6 years ago. You probably don't remember, but I let her sign during the estate planning update, I murmured, the memory coming back like a slap. She said it was just to simplify the paperwork. She's been transferring from that account in small bursts, $5K here, $7,000 there, for the past 14 months. Total amount missing? $68,000. My hands clenched into fists. She stole from a child's college fund? Julian didn't answer. He didn't need to. She also opened a safety deposit box in Portland under both your names, he added. My guy at the bank was able to confirm contents under the pretense of account auditing. What's in it? 3 watches, 2 of yours. A diamond necklace she never reported. And your mother's engagement ring. My throat tightened. That ring had been missing for years. She claimed it had been lost in a move. She's a pro, Julian said gently. I've seen a few like her. They don't just lie, they invest in the illusion. For as long as it's useful. I met David the next morning with Julian's report in hand. She didn't just betray me, I said. She looted me. David read through the findings in silence, then looked up. Do you want to amend the settlement and press criminal charges now? I didn't answer right away. What I wanted, more than anything, was to confront her face to face. Not with lawyers, not in court, but as a man who now knew every last secret. So that's exactly what I did. I requested a meeting through her lawyer. Neutral location. No press. No posturing. Just truth. We met in a sterile office space in downtown Portland. She walked in wearing a tailored dress and her usual mask of calm. But when she saw the folders in front of me, her smile faltered. You wanted to talk? She said, voice tight. I opened Julian's report and laid out the evidence. Every withdrawal. Every forged signature. Every stolen item. She stared at it in silence. Then met my eyes. You dug deep. No, I replied. I finally stopped trusting you. She folded her arms. So what now? You want me in jail? I wanted clarity. And now I have it. You didn't just fall out of love. You were never in it. Her jaw clenched. You think this makes you better than me? No, I said. It makes me free. Then I stood. The district attorney will be receiving this report. Whether they pursue charges is up to them. Melina stood too, voice rising. You do that, Carter, and I'll make your name radioactive in this industry. Don't think I won't. I gave her a sad, small smile. Then you'll finally be telling the truth about me, because I am dangerous now. And I walked out. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard. The DA never needed my encouragement. 2 weeks after our confrontation, I received notice from the county prosecutor's office. They'd reviewed Julian's forensic report. The evidence was too compelling to ignore. Multiple acts of financial misappropriation, trust abuse, false declarations, and potentially wire fraud. Melina wasn't arrested in handcuffs on the front page of the Portland Chronicle. She was subpoenaed quietly, booked, and released pending trial. But the stain had already set in. Her interior design business, once featured in glossy Pacific Northwest lifestyle magazines, began losing clients fast. When word got around that she was under criminal investigation for misusing a child's college fund, the internet did what the courts hadn't yet. They judged her. And for the first time, she couldn't manipulate the narrative. Couldn't gaslight a community into believing she was the victim. Couldn't turn the tables. Because the receipts spoke louder than the lipstick ever could. Kyle vanished. After the business lease in Savannah collapsed and his investors fled, he posted one last desperate motivational quote on Instagram. Sometimes rock bottom is the solid ground you need. Then he went dark. Last I heard, he was working at a second-tier gym chain outside of Austin, Texas. Rumor had it Madison blocked his number and left him with 3 months' rent unpaid on their sublet. The fitness studio dream? A pile of unpaid invoices and an abandoned lease. As for Jason, he took a hit he couldn't recover from. The court not only dismissed his claim, but slapped him with $19,000 in legal penalties for filing a malicious suit. He filed for personal bankruptcy within a month. That shell company? Dissolved. But the final blow didn't come from me. It came from someone I hadn't expected to speak again. Melina's sister, Serena. She called me one morning out of the blue. I just wanted to say thank you, she said, for not letting her get away with it. I didn't say anything. What do you say to someone whose blood betrayed you? I know she was my sister, Serena continued. But what she did to you, and to that child's trust fund, I can't stand by it anymore. She told me that she had reached out to the prosecutor to provide a statement, one that described Melina's past manipulations, including shady real estate deals she'd witnessed years ago. I kept my mouth shut before. Not anymore. When I hung up, I sat in my study for a long time, staring out at the water. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. And that was enough. 6 months later, the house felt different. The siding had been redone, reclaimed wood, smooth and sanded. The walls freshly painted. I replaced the aging furniture Melina had chosen with modern pieces I picked myself. I kept the fireplace but took down every old photograph. It was no longer our house. It was mine. I used part of the return settlement funds and court-ordered restitution to establish a scholarship in my godson's name. The rest? I invested into a property trust for children who'd been victims of financial fraud by guardians or family. Some people asked me why I didn't just disappear. Move to Mexico. Start over completely. But this house was never just a home. It was my line in the sand. On the 1-year anniversary of that first phone call from Melina, the one where she said she sold the house and left me, I returned to the same spot on the deck with a glass of bourbon and the ocean in front of me. That day, I received a letter from the DA's office. Melina had accepted a plea deal. No jail time. 5 years probation. Full restitution of the trust fund. A ban from serving as trustee or managing financial assets for any party other than herself for 10 years. I folded the letter quietly and slid it into a drawer. I didn't need to frame it. Justice wasn't in the paperwork, it was in the silence that followed it. The phone stopped ringing. The lies stopped spinning. The chaos died down. And I could hear my own thoughts again. One afternoon in early fall, I took a walk down the beach path that ran behind the house. Waves curled and hissed at the edge of the sand. The sky was bruised with violet clouds. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt weightless. Not healed. Not yet. But free. That was enough. There's one final thing I'll tell you. In my desk drawer, beneath the documents and folders and final notices, there's an old photo, Melina and me on the day we bought the house. Her arm around me. My face flushed with pride. Her smile bright, wide, convincing. I keep it not because I miss her, but because it reminds me of the most important lesson I ever learned. You can love someone completely and still not know who they are. But the truth? The truth always comes eventually. And when it does, you don't run. You stand your ground. Even if it takes everything you have. Because once you survive betrayal, once you crawl back from the edge, you're no longer afraid of falling. You know exactly where the edge is. And you build something stronger. Right behind it.